7.6 vertex form of a quadratic function. And this is kind of a continuation on the last lesson where we were also writing in vertex form. The only difference for today's lesson is that in today's lesson, you actually have to find the value for a, right? In the last lesson, we really only focused on identifying the vertex point, and today we're going to identify a as well. And we're going to write the whole equation in vertex form. So to get started, I just really want to emphasize the differences between vertex form, right? Guys, this is vertex form. And we talked about how in vertex form, we've got the two values. We've got h in here with x, and h is the x coordinate of the vertex, right? H is the x coordinate of the vertex. And you will also notice that you're going to have the opposite sign here. You're going to have the opposite sign here always because of the negative in the formula. So we have h of the vertex in there with x, and we also have k on the end, and that is our y coordinate of our vertex. So the vertex point xy comes from the vertex form if it's written like this. Today we're really focused on how do we figure out the a value because it's not as obvious as the h and the k value. Just to remind y'all, this is different from what we worked on previously, which was standard form. And standard form is this one over here where we have ax squared plus bx plus c. Both of these represent a quadratic. There's just different ways to write them. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at problem number 1, and let's see what we can kind of remember. So we're asked to find the vertex here. Let's zoom in. I got my vertex right here at the point 1, 2. So if my vertex is at the point 1, 2, then h is, so we got 1, 2 for my vertex. H is 1, k is 2. Okay, and then we got to figure out a. We'll kind of get to that in a second. Don't forget, since I have a lowest point on this graph, right, that vertex is the lowest point on this graph, then I have a minimum for this quadratic. In order to find a, you really want to use stat edit. You can do it by hand, but you've got to plug things in, and it just kind of takes a lot of steps. So since you guys are so good at stat edit, then that's kind of what we're going to do. Always go ahead and put your vertex point in the center of your table. Always do this, because if you're going to make stat edit work on your calculator, you need the vertex and you need 2 really good points on either side of the vertex. Okay, that's crucial. So this point over here I'm going to use is 0, 3, and this point on the right is 2, 3. And those are the points I'm going to put in my table. One more time, your 2 points that you put in your table need to be on either side of the vertex. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my calculator. I'm going to use stat edit, right? Maybe let's make a little note here for the future. Okay, so we're going to say put points in stat edit. And don't forget to choose option 5, which says quad reg, right? We want a quadratic regression. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do that. So we're going to go to stat and edit. We're going to type in all we need. So I got 0 and 1 and 2 for my x's. And on my y's, I got 3 and 2 and 3. All right. Oops. Darn it. Okay, so 2. Sorry. And then on my y's, I have 3 and 2 and 3. All right. Stat, calc. Option 5, quad reg. You guys may have to hit enter on yours as well. And I got my equation. So the only value I'm interested in here is a. But let's go ahead and let's take a second and let's write what my calculator gives me. It gives me y equals 1x squared minus 2x plus 3. This right here is standard form. Your calculator automatically gives you standard form. We don't want standard form right now. That's not what we were looking for. This equation that we got here, whatever we end up writing for our equation, they'll be equivalent, just written in different forms. But what our calculator does give us is the a value. So a must be 1. All right, A must be 1, because don't forget, this is A, this is B, and this is C. And for our vertex form, we need A, right? A is in both, right, guys? I have A here and I have A here. But in standard form, I've got B and C. And in vertex form, I've got H and K. So A is the only letter represented in both. So my calculator helped me figure out that A is 1. Let's do that in a different color so we can really kind of tell. How about pink? All right, A is 1. And so in my formula here, I've got A is 1. So let's look at this to kind of write it out. We're going to look at this one right here. So I've got y equals, f of x equals, same thing, 1 for A. And then my formula has x minus, so I'm going to write x minus squared. And then what was my h value? Well, my h value was 1, right? Or I guess I could see it here. My h value is 1, so I'm going to put a minus 1 and then a plus 2. And remember, y'all, I see a minus 1 even though h was a positive 1. And that's supposed to happen. We're supposed to have opposite signs in our formula versus our actual vertex, right? Our actual h value. Cool. So this right here is my equation. So let's kind of really emphasize this. This is the equation I got. This was the equation I got from my calculator. They are equivalent. You know what? Let me just kind of prove this to you, and I promise we'll go so much faster on the next examples because I know this is kind of tedious. So I'm typing in 1x squared minus 2x plus 3, and then I'm going to type in my vertex form, which had a 1 on the outside, which technically you don't really need to type. We got x minus 1 squared. Don't forget the squared or it won't be a quadratic, and then a plus 2. So take a look now when I graph. Here's my first equation, my standard form equation. There's my vertex form equation, right? They're the same thing. All right, so let's go ahead and let's move a little bit quicker here. Let's look at example number 2. First things first, let's go ahead and identify my vertex. My vertex he is right here, and that point is -3, -1. So I'm going to put that in the center of my table over here, -3, -1. Got a place to write it down below, and now I also know h is -3 and k is -1. So with one piece of information, I filled it in 4 different places. Now we need a couple more good points. So I'm thinking this one looks pretty good. That's going to be -5, -2. And that one looks pretty good, -1, -2. So those numbers are going to go in my table. And we're going to do stat edit to figure out my a value. And yes, it's going to give me a whole standard form equation, but really I'm only interested in a. So I've got -5 and -3 and -1. And then for my y's, click over. Okay. And then for my y's, I've got -2 and -1 and -2. All right, so it's stat edit, stat calc. We're choosing option 5 for a quadratic. And I get A equals -0.25, and then I get B and C, which I don't really care about. So A, we're going to write down it's -0.25, and I'm just going to put from calc so I don't forget how I got that. Okay, -0.25, and I got that from my calculator. Okay, so now I'm ready to write my equation, and I've got a space in front, y equals parentheses x minus squared. I just kind of set everything up for myself here. My a value goes in the front, so -0.25, and then my x value goes in the parentheses with x, so I get to write x minus -3, and on the end we have that -1. Now, y'all, we don't leave this, right? We don't leave minus negative, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to a plus sign and call this good. All right, there's the vertex form for my equation. My standard form, I could totally see right here on my calculator screen. My vertex form is written here in my notes. Okay, oh, forgot to tell you, by the way, this has a highest point, right? The vertex is the highest point, so that has a maximum. Alrighty, example 3, here we go. My vertex is at -5, 2. I need to fill in the other places here. I got -5, 2 for my vertex, so h is -5 and k is 2. And this has a highest point. My vertex is my highest point, so that is a maximum. All right, let's find some other good vertices, some other good points here. This one looks pretty good, so I got -6, 0. This one looks pretty good, -4, 0. So those are the points I'm going to use in my table. Let me reiterate. I know I already said this, but y'all make sure you use a point on either side of the vertex, right? Either side of that vertex. Let's find A by going to my calculator. I'm going to do -6. Started typing. Yeah. Okay, so stat edit. Here we go. All right, I've got -6 and -5 and -4. And then I've got, for my y's, 0 and 2 and 0. Go stat calc, option 5. And I know I'm going through this really fast, but hopefully you guys have seen enough examples for that to be fine. So A is -2. All right. Now I can go ahead and I can write my equation, right? A is -2. So I've got y equals, I'm going to leave a space for A, I've got x minus squared. All right, A was -2, K was -5, and H was -5 and K was +2. And again, just like the last example, we're going to change this to a plus sign because we do not leave a minus negative. All right, last but not least, fourth example, here we go. All right, let's see here. My vertex is down here at 6, -4. 6, -4, 6, -4, and I'm going to put that in my table. Now, let's see. In this example, my vertex is the lowest point on the graph, which means that that is a minimum. Let's go ahead and let's find some good points. This one looks good, so that's 8, -2, and this one looks good, which is 4, -2. All right, 4, -2, and 8, -2. I'm going to use my calculator to find A. So stat edit again. We've got 4 and 6 and 8. And for my y values here, I've got -2, -4, and then -2 again. All right, stat calc, option 5, enter. And A is 0.5. All right, so 0.5. So my equation, let's set it up. We've got y equals, and then I have a space for A. I've got x minus something squared. Let's fill in our numbers. A goes in the front, so 0.5. And h goes in the parentheses, so -6, and then a -4 at the end. Okay, just a kind of a throwback to last week's lesson, look at h. H is -5, but it's a +5 in the equation. Right? H is a positive number, but it's a -6 in the equation. The h value and the equation will always have those opposite signs. All right? And today we just kind of reminded ourselves that we can find our equation with a calculator in standard form, and if you need it in vertex form, just figure out the vertex, but still use that calculator to find your A value.